Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been in the events industry for over a decade now, specializing in lighting design. Started out doing small gigs at local clubs before working my way up to bigger venues. What I love most about my job is creating the perfect atmosphere, whether it's for a wedding, concert, or corporate event. Every show is different, and I take pride in making each one special. Last summer, I got a call from someone who knew my friend from college. Their daughter was getting married at this fancy hotel downtown, and their lighting guy had backed out last minute. The pay wasn't great, but I had a free weekend and figured I'd help out. Plus, it would be a chance to work in that hotel's grand ballroom, a venue I've been eyeing for a while. I brought my best equipment, robotic lights, a professional-grade console, the works. The setup was pretty ambitious for a wedding. We're talking about a full lighting grid that would create these beautiful, synchronized patterns across the ceiling and walls. Usually, I'd have a crew of 10 for a job this size, but 2 guys called in sick at the last minute. We were racing against the clock. 8 of us had been working non-stop since early morning, running cables, mounting lights, and programming sequences. The doors would open in 10 minutes, and I still hadn't finished programming all the cues. That's when I realized I hadn't had a single drink of water all day. My throat was bone dry, and I knew I needed to hydrate to stay focused for the next 6 hours of the event. I spotted the bar set up nearby and walked over. The bartender was arranging his glasses, wearing this crisp white shirt and black vest, looking like he'd just stepped out of a fancy cocktail manual. I politely asked him if I could get a seltzer water. He looked up at my all-black work clothes, then gave me this slow once-over like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. With obvious disdain, he told me that the drinks weren't for staff and suggested I could drink tap water from the kitchen. The way he said staff made it sound like a dirty word. I stood there for a moment, processing his attitude. Here I was, busting my back to make this venue look amazing, and this guy couldn't even spare a glass of bubbled water. I gave him a curt thanks and walked away. I went back to my console, but an idea was already forming in my mind. See, these robotic lights I use are seriously powerful. We're talking 100,000 lumens each. That's like having a small sun pointed right at you. They can also focus down to a very precise spot. It took me about 2 minutes to program a special cue. Nothing too obvious, just one light randomly selecting the bar area every couple of minutes, focusing down to a tight beam, and hitting full brightness for 5 seconds. Just long enough to be annoying, just random enough to seem like part of the show. The wedding started and everything was running smoothly. The dance floor was lit perfectly. The wall patterns were creating this gorgeous ambiance, and every few minutes a bright beam would sweep across the bar. I could see the bartender getting more and more frustrated. He'd be trying to mix drinks or talk to guests, and suddenly, bam! Instant spotlight. After about 1 hour, he finally cracked. He came marching over to my console, sweat visible on his forehead, his perfect vest looking a bit rumpled now. He demanded that I turn down the lights, complaining that they kept hitting the bar and he couldn't see what he was doing. I gave him the same condescending look he'd given me earlier. With mock politeness, I explained that this lighting design was specifically requested by the client, and it wasn't for staff to decide how the lights should be programmed. He grew more agitated, accusing me of doing it on purpose. I maintained my professional demeanor and suggested that if he had concerns about the venue's lighting design, he would need to take that up with management, as I was just following my programming instructions. He stood there fuming for a moment, then stormed off. About 15 minutes later he came back, this time with a cold seltzer water. He offered it to me, clearly hoping it would help fix the lighting situation. I thanked him cheerfully and mentioned that I had just remembered I could adjust that section of the programming. I made a big show of pressing a few buttons, and mysteriously the random spotlights on the bar stopped completely. The bartender didn't say another word to me for the rest of the night, but I noticed he was a lot more polite to all the other vendors after that. The wedding was a huge success, by the way. The bride and groom loved the lighting, and I even got a few business cards from impressed guests. I also heard that the bartender got a talking to from the hotel management about treating all event staff with respect. Apparently, some other vendors had complained about him before, and my little light show was a last straw. I'm a veterinarian, and I've been living in my current house for about 5 years now. I have this amazing German Shepherd who I rescued 3 years ago when his previous owner brought him to my clinic with a broken leg, claiming he fell down the stairs. The x-rays told a different story, and after reporting the abuse, I ended up adopting him myself. He's the sweetest boy you could imagine, though he can be quite protective when needed. About 6 months ago, this woman moved in next door. From day one, she was insufferable, always filming these weird social media videos in her backyard, screaming and dancing at all hours. My other neighbors and I had complained multiple times about the noise, but she would just tell us that she was a content creator and this was her job before slamming the door in our faces. The real problem started when she noticed my dog. She kept trying to include him in her videos without asking, reaching over the fence to film him while he was in our yard. I caught her doing this several times and told her to stop, but she'd just roll her eyes and brag about her follower count, saying my dog should be grateful for the exposure. Then came that day. I was working from home catching up on some patient files when I noticed it had gotten suspiciously quiet next door. Usually, you could hear her yelling into her phone or playing music, but there was nothing. I did a quick check around the house and realized I couldn't find my dog. I figured he was probably napping somewhere, but something felt off. That's when I heard movement on the roof next door. I went outside and saw this guy standing in her driveway with his phone out filming upward. When I followed his gaze, my blood ran cold. There she was on her second-floor roof, struggling to hold my dog while he squirmed in her arms. I demanded to know what was going on. The guy looked at me like I was interrupting something important. He casually explained that they were filming a survival challenge that was going to go viral. When I asked what kind of challenge, he told me they were testing if dogs always land on their feet like cats do. I've never felt rage like that before in my life. My dog was whimpering, clearly scared, as this psychopath was getting ready to throw him off a roof for social media likes. I yelled at them, asking if they were out of their minds. Then I immediately whistled for my dog. It's our special signal that means attack mode. He's trained for protection, and that whistle is his cue. The change was instant. He went from scared to full guard dog mode, snarling and thrashing in her arms. She started screaming at me, saying I was ruining the shot. She was struggling to hold on to him as he fought back, and that's when it happened. She lost her balance. I watched in what felt like slow motion as she stumbled backward, let go of my dog, who thankfully landed safely on the roof and tumbled over the edge. She landed with a sickening crunch and her screams were probably heard 3 blocks away. Her friend dropped his phone and ran to her while I called emergency services. My dog had found his way back down through her house and was by my side in seconds, completely unharmed but shaking. When the police and ambulance arrived, her friend actually tried to blame me, claiming I had commanded my dog to attack her. Fortunately, he'd been so focused on filming that he'd captured the whole thing on his phone. The police took one look at the video and arrested both of them, her for attempted animal cruelty and him as an accessory. She ended up with 2 broken legs, a broken pelvis, and 3 years in prison. Her friend got 18 months. Turns out she had a history of increasingly dangerous stunts for social media, including one where she nearly set another neighbor's garden on fire for a challenge. I later found out she had actually drugged some meat and thrown it into my yard earlier that day to make my dog drowsy and easier to handle. The toxicology report was part of what helped build the case against her. She tried to make videos from jail about being wrongfully convicted, but the evidence was so overwhelming that it just made people angrier at her. I heard all her social media accounts were banned for promoting dangerous behavior. My boy got extra treats and belly rubs for weeks after that. We also installed security cameras around the house, not taking any chances with crazy neighbors anymore. He's currently snoring at my feet as I type this, probably dreaming about chasing squirrels rather than being thrown off roofs by insane social media influencers. I've been hosting Thanksgiving at our house for the past 5 years. My husband and I bought this beautiful home with a spacious kitchen specifically because we love entertaining and hosting family gatherings. We don't have children of our own, so hosting these events gives us a chance to spoil our nieces and nephews and spend quality time with the whole family. This year's Thanksgiving was supposed to be special. I'd spent weeks planning the menu, making sure to include everyone's favorites. My mother-in-law and sisters-in-law always bring the desserts, which is a huge help. They're amazing bakers, and their contributions are always a highlight of our gatherings. I started cooking 2 days before. My husband took those days off work to help me prepare everything. We made 2 massive turkeys, a glazed ham, 20 pounds of mashed potatoes. Yes, you read that right. 2 large pans of dressing, sweet potato casserole, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, and so much more. The spread was incredible, if I do say so myself. Everyone arrived around 3 in the afternoon. My husband's brother and his wife brought their 4 kids. His sister came with her husband and their 3 teenagers. My mother-in-law and father-in-law brought what seemed like an entire bakery's worth of desserts, pies, cookies, rolls, you name it. But there was one more guest I hadn't expected, my husband's cousin and his entire family. They weren't originally supposed to come, but apparently they called my husband last minute saying they had nowhere else to go. The dinner itself was wonderful. Everyone seemed to enjoy the food, complimenting the turkeys and fighting over the last spoonful of mashed potatoes. We had such a lovely evening filled with laughter and stories. The kids played video games in the basement while the adults caught up over wine and coffee. As the evening wound down, my husband, thoughtful as always, brought out some plastic containers he'd bought specifically for leftovers. He told everyone to help themselves to some leftovers before they left. We then went to the front room to continue chatting with his parents while people packed up. I was exhausted from all the cooking and hosting, so I put my feet up on the ottoman. When it was time to say goodbye, I noticed the kitchen looked tidied up. All the food from the island and table had been put away. I was too tired to check the details and went straight to bed, looking forward to a delicious leftover turkey sandwich the next day. The next morning I woke up starving. I've been dreaming about reheating those mashed potatoes with gravy and having some turkey. I practically bounced to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and froze. There was nothing there except a sad bag of turkey wings and half a bag of dressing. I thought I must be looking in the wrong place and checked the garage fridge. Empty. When my husband came downstairs, I was sitting at the kitchen island, still in shock. I asked him if he had maybe donated the leftover food to the homeless shelter. When he asked why, I explained that all the food was gone, even the unopened desserts his mom had brought. That's when he told me he had seen his cousin and his family packing up food the night before. They had been filling gallon-sized Ziploc bags with everything, even taking the unopened desserts and all the food other people had brought. When I asked if he was serious about the 20 pounds of mashed potatoes being gone, he apologized and admitted he should have said something but didn't want to create drama. I was furious. I immediately called my mother-in-law to tell her what happened, including how they'd taken all her desserts. She was shocked and immediately said she would come over with food for us. She arrived an hour later with fresh baked rolls and 2 pies. Then she did something I didn't expect. She called her nephew, the cousin, directly. She scolded him harshly for taking advantage of our hospitality, reminding him how long we'd spent cooking and how he'd cleared out our entire kitchen. She was especially angry about him taking her desserts that weren't meant for him to take home. She demanded he bring back every unopened container, threatening to tell everyone in the family what he did and ban him from future family gatherings if he didn't comply. 2 hours later, the cousin's wife showed up at our door, red-faced with 3 bags of unopened food and desserts. She couldn't meet my eyes as she handed them over. She tried to apologize, saying they got carried away and it wouldn't happen again. I told her that she was right. It wouldn't happen again because they weren't invited to our house anymore. The following week, my mother-in-law hosted a special leftover Thanksgiving dinner just for us, with all new desserts and sides. She also made sure everyone in the family knew what her nephew had done, not to shame him, but to ensure no other hosts would have their generosity abused like we did. As for Christmas, we're still hosting, but now we have a new rule. Leftovers are packed and distributed by the hosts only, and everyone gets an equal share. I've been working at this small convenience store for about 8 months now. It's not my dream job, but it helps pay the bills while I'm finishing my business degree. The pay isn't great, but the evening shifts fit perfectly with my class schedule, and until recently I thought my boss was decent enough. The store itself is pretty basic. We sell the usual stuff you'd expect, nothing fancy. My boss bought it about 2 years ago, and let's just say he's what you'd call a penny pincher. He refuses to spend money on basic security measures like cameras or proper locks, always saying stuff like, "We're in a good neighborhood," or "That's just unnecessary expense." The incident happened last Tuesday. I was closing up as usual at 10 p.m., following the same routine I've done hundreds of times. Counted the register, put the key in its usual spot. Yeah, we don't even have a proper safe. And locked the back door handle from the inside before leaving through it. That's our sophisticated security system right there. The next morning I woke up to several missed calls from my co-workers. Apparently someone had broken into the store overnight and stolen all the money from the register. When I got there, I could see they had forced the door open. Not surprising considering how cheap that lock was. My boss called an emergency meeting that afternoon. As soon as I walked in, I could tell by his face that this wasn't going to be good. He started by announcing to everyone that someone had broken in the night before and stolen $2,300 from the register. When I asked if he'd called the police, he dismissed the idea, saying he didn't want to embarrass the business. I tried suggesting we should file a report since insurance might cover it, but he wouldn't hear it. Instead, he started accusing me. He claimed that since only employees knew where the register keys were kept, and I was closing last night, this had to be connected to me somehow. When I asked if he was really suggesting I had something to do with this, he got even more direct. He told me I would be taking 100% responsibility for the loss, and that it would be coming out of my next paycheck. I protested, telling him that wasn't legal and pointing out that I had followed every security procedure we had. I reminded him that it wasn't my fault the lock was cheap and we didn't have cameras. He just told me to watch my tone and said that either I failed to lock up properly or I was involved. Either way, he was holding me responsible. I was furious but kept my cool. After the meeting, I went straight home and documented everything. I took photos of the damaged lock, made copies of my timesheet, and saved all text messages between me and my co-workers about the incident. Then I did what my boss was too proud to do. I went to the police station and filed a report. The officer who took my statement was very interested in the details. She asked me to clarify several points about our security measures. She seemed shocked when I confirmed that we had no cameras, no proper safe, and just a cheap lock that had been broken for months. When I told her about my boss wanting to dock my pay instead of filing an insurance claim or police report, she was even more concerned. She explained that this wasn't just suspicious, it was illegal. She told me he couldn't make me pay for losses like that and suggested I file a complaint with the labor board. I did exactly that. 2 weeks later, things got interesting. The police investigation revealed that the break-in was actually connected to a string of similar burglaries in the area. They caught the guy. Turned out he was a professional thief who specifically targeted businesses with poor security. The labor board wasn't happy with my boss either. They told him that deducting the stolen money from my pay was illegal and he'd face hefty fines if he tried it. But the real kicker came from his insurance company. They refused to cover the loss because he had ignored multiple recommendations to upgrade the store's security. In the end, I quit and found a better job at a properly managed store. My ex-boss had to pay for new security systems, including cameras and proper locks, which cost him way more than if he'd just installed them in the first place. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.